Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today on this month's webinar aimed at bringing new ideas and fresh perspectives to the publishing and media industry. My name is Brett Kierstead. I'm Vice President of Sales for Knowledge Marketing, and this month's webinar topic is entitled Audience Data Licensing, Publishing's Untapped Goldmine. I want to thank everybody for attending today. As you know, and when you attend webinars, please use the GoToMeeting dialog box for questions along the way. We'll run about 30-35 minutes today and hopefully bring you guys some new ideas and insights on this emerging and popular topic about how data is impacting the way that you guys run and monetize your business. Knowledge Marketing's perspective is, as a technology provider to the publishing and media industry, we have a data management platform that's designed to organize and bring together all the various different data sources that you have information, internal, external, first party, third party, all the various different components into a logical and useful asset for you to monetize your business. And we'll talk a little bit more about that today. The insight that we gain comes from our great customers that are doing unique things in terms of how they're organizing their information, how they're using, collecting, and growing their data, and how they're creating monetary values for their business and monetizing their information. So today we're going to cover some new perspectives, and hopefully I'll take a subject that everyone seems to be talking about, data, and turn it into something that is tangible and useful, because if you're like me, you read a lot about it, there's a lot of words out there, and a lot of the folks we talk to struggle to understand how can it directly impact me in a positive way in the day-to-day way I go about my business. So we're going to cover a little bit of baseline data. We'll get a consensus agreement on what we mean by data. We'll talk a little bit about the industry buzz and just show you who's talking and what they're talking about. We'll talk a little bit about the data asset that a publisher has, just so we're clear. I'll give you some examples from outside of publishing that we can draw from, and then give you a couple of case studies specifically within publishing on how data is changing and being licensed and monetized in various different ways. So the baseline data concept, if you think about information or data points, historically in publishing and media, data has been used in a cycle to create and sell products and services. They're interrelated together. So if you think in the most simplest example, we have a print magazine and we use the information about that magazine in terms of registrations and subscription size and all of that to sell advertising within that. Or on websites, we have data about how many people click. And if we offer 100 clicks, we charge a certain cost. Or we read information and we create services. So the interrelationship that data has with products and services has been the historical model. But the paradigm is shifting to where the data in and of itself is becoming an asset that you use to create revenue directly tied to the information. In other words, the data itself does not lead to you selling a different product. So another way to think about that is that historically you had yourself, you looked at data, and the end that you were seeking to achieve was to sell a magazine or an advertisement or a web ad or an event or whatever it might be. But what we're saying now is that the data itself is an asset that you should be looking at to create value for your business in a direct manner. So again, understanding that that first model still exists. You still need to sell products, and the information that's available in there and enhancing that and reading that and understanding that is helpful, but we also want to remember that the data itself is an asset that we really want to seek to monetize. This is a little bit of a long quote, but I want to read it to you because it was poignant to me when you think about how this is fitting into the executive level world. A publisher said to us the other day on a call, said, you know, in 2 to 3 years, my goal is for every dollar we get directly selling products to individuals, like magazines, or indirectly through ads and campaigns. So in other words, you sell that person as part of an advertising campaign. So in addition to that dollar we get from them, we want an additional 15 to 20 cents in the direct sale of data related to that individual. So yes, you're going to sell me a magazine, and that's great, and we want to sell me products, and we want to use me as a lead gen, but I also want to take the data that I've collected and monetize that directly. So it's a good way to think about it is when you value your individual audience, you value them from a product perspective as well as place a value on the data. So the industry buzz, I was just down in Miami at the BIMS conference, which is an aggregation of a few different events, SIAA, ABM, and some other groups, and thematically there were a lot of interesting presentations. One of the presentations I saw was from a gentleman named Tony Uphoff, who's the CEO of Business.com, and his quote was, "If you're in the media business, you're in the data business." There was also a presentation from Joanna Kropp at Penton. Those of you who follow Penton's Smart Reach program understand what they're trying to do there for direct data monetization. And she had a really nice presentation on customer modeling behavioral targeting that talked a lot about how they're using data products. Brent Riley, and really I think the team at Randall Riley is really the epitome of how to transform their business, was a keynote, one of the speakers, and had a great presentation. And if you follow their history, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of their publicly available examples of what they do, you'll see they have an interesting strategy around how data is at the center of their business. They write articles about data. They talk about data's impact on its industry. They talk about how data has transformed their business. They really are the poster child for how to successfully use data to create additional revenue as well as make it a culture of the business. They won the big Jesse Neal Award for the overall grand award for an article series that they did on data itself within the industry. So they're so savvy about incorporating in at different points. It's really a really good testimony. We'll use some of their examples later as well. So the theme that I have on this, which I put up begrudgingly, but at the request of my marketing department, is to use the theme that it's all about the data. And really that is the theme that's going on across the industry. It's a theme that's really driving the way publishers and media companies are planning their businesses moving forward. So let's talk about the assets so that we're on a consistent page. You know, there's really different definitions of data that you have available. And just to make sure that we're clear, you know, you have first-party data. People talk about that as the data that you've collected directly off subscriptions, off magazines, you know, places that you've asked questions, things that you've captured on your own, your website, behavior, etc. A second term is third-party data, which people understand was collected by someone else and aggregated and generally made available for purchase. So there's a lot of append services, data brokers, and things like that that have data available that they've collected that is available to you, but it's also available to the next guy. There's a new term emerging called second-party data, which is similar to third-party data in that it was collected by someone else, but it's really a private transaction. So imagine you're a publisher, and there's a publisher in a related industry with their own private data that they don't share, but together you get together and enhance your data with maybe someone else's private data source. So again, it's taking data that you're not collecting, but it also is maybe more thoughtful proprietary data that isn't publicly available. So together, this data sources, these originating places, make up the assets that you can have as a publisher for the data that you're looking to sell. Again, it could be government data, it could be publicly available data from a brokerage house, it could be any kind of information that you can gather can come from various different sources to create the asset that you have. From a publisher perspective, again, we tend to see it things like demographic data, behavioral data, contextual data. These are the building blocks of what information is available on a specific record or specific individual. Whether that data is used specifically for one person or whether it's aggregated across your whole audience, this information is the building blocks of how you go to market from a data perspective. So if you look at the profile, if you think about an individual within your universe, they have a profile. They have information that you've collected first party on their demographics. You've collected potentially some of their behavioral information, maybe some contextual data. You've appended that with maybe government data or second-party data that you purchased from another source or third-party data that you've acquired from a data append service and created this significant profile. And from that profile will be the ability for you to turn that into an asset. There's an interesting perspective, though, that has been shared many times by both our clients as well as the way you think about industry. I was looking up quotes, and there's a quote many, many years ago in 1984, so by a gentleman named Stuart Brand to Steve Wozniak, who is obviously a name many of you would be familiar with. But he said, information wants to be free, but information also wants to be expensive, and that tension will not go away. And of course, 30 years later, we all understand that. My interpretation of that and what I've kind of heard from different customers, another way to think about it is, think of it this way. When you think about your own information, that ubiquitous data seeks to be free. In other words, information that's readily available anywhere is a free source. But scarce information seeks to be expensive. In other words, the more, if you think of the needle in the haystack, the more someone can provide you with that little nugget, that scarce piece of information that is useful to you, is getting more and more expensive as they're harder and harder to find. So if you think about yourself and what you have as information, when you think about creating a data business or a data asset, think of it this way. Ubiquitous data is stuff that not only that you collected, but anybody else can get access to without a whole lot of cost and expense. Name, physical address, title, the company name, revenue, product information. I mean, these are building blocks of data, but they're not really that unique. They're data elements that many, many different people can go through different lengths to access. They seek to be as cheap as possible. However, on the flip side of the equation is information that you know you've spent a lot of time cultivating, digging hard for, asking these questions that really aren't readily available. So it could be things like an email address. I mean, even as simple as that might be hard to find, or something like budget authority, or content topics, or a lead score like an engagement score, or brand engagements like understanding people's reader behaviors, or even unique insight that you've created from your research. Many of you, especially in B2B, have industry content expertise within a particular vertical. And if you can combine that with data and insight that you gain from trends and data, you put them together and you have an expensive and scarce asset, a perspective on your data in the industry that no one else offers based on what you have. So a good thought process is don't look at all pieces of data the same. Some are worth more than others, and it's important that you understand that. And hopefully this ubiquitous versus scarcity mindset is one that can help you. Okay, so let's talk about some non-publishing examples before we get into the specifics of our industry. So if you think about this mindset, let's just call it the traditional list mindset. You know, if you think about data and all you think of it is from a context of lists, there's lots of sources out there. You know, Hoover's is a list. Salesforce has data.com, which has pieces of data that you can get. Infogroup, you know, fine, they're a data broker, or insert list broker here. Or legacy publishers. People come to you and say, I want to rent your list. I want to buy your list. I want to do this with your list. I want to email your list. That list mindset is really a legacy thought process. And I'm going to give you a different way of thinking about it for your perspective on people that think about data in a different way. One of our clients said one time, and I won't give his name in case he's on the phone, but he had one of the funniest lines of all time, and you think of it this way. His frustration was, we were looking, he has 1 million something names in his database, and they know everything about them. And the salesperson came up and said, oh, we need to generate some names or some leads for an advertiser I just sold a program to. So what can we blast them out with an email? And his quote to me was, Why is it that every time we need to provide leads to advertisers, we have to send a frickin' email blast? And it's just a mindset that we have this information, but we're not allowed to give it. We're not going to offer it up unless we send something out. We spam them, blast them, email them, or what have you. And the mindset is very different from the way things work in a lot of different industries. So I'm going to use LinkedIn. We've all heard of these guys. Obviously, unless you're not paying attention, we all know not only are they making inroads in our space, but they just have an interesting business model that I think we can learn from. So LinkedIn is a community. They have a community business model. And so if you think about a publisher, we talk in terms of things like we have subscribers, we have readers, we have attendees, we even have audience. LinkedIn thinks of them as a community, as a network of people. You know, publishers have products that yield data. LinkedIn, if you think about their history, they started as data, and from that they've generated products. The publisher mindset has very much been this protect the data and audience. We hide things, you know, the detail levels, we guard them so carefully. But if you think about what a LinkedIn does, is they expose data, they aggregate data, they inform about information, and then they turn around and license the information. So they're strategic and thoughtful in how they expose information out to the world in order to give a teaser, if you will, and entice you to buy more, use their data. Okay? If you think about your own audience, there's no real reason that a publisher shouldn't do that, except for the one fact that people offer their information for the most part in a voluntary manner into LinkedIn, and they understand that it's being exchanged. The question is are many of you making sure that when people give you data, you know, your subscribers, your readers, your attendees, if you have permission to use that data, then what makes you any different from the LinkedIn model? And if you think it's working for them, here's what they do, right? So it's free to be in the community. I can put up my LinkedIn profile and provide whatever information I want. I would argue that analogously, a publisher, especially those in B2B that offer a free product, requires data to be provided on their behalf. You're technically giving them access into the community. And then from there, LinkedIn has gone and done things like recruiter licenses or sales licenses or communication, direct communication protocol like InMail. So these tools come at license fees in many cases that run $7,000 to $10,000 per seat per year. LinkedIn Talent Solutions is a good example where you all and we all can go out and see a certain amount of information on a profile, but if I want the good stuff, I have to pay a license fee for it. And the question then becomes, well, is it working? Well, you don't have to look too far to know. Just looking at their Q3 numbers, their talent solutions, their marketing solutions, their premium subscription products that fall underneath their data has generated a whole heck of a lot of money. And there's a big reason why these guys are worth $25 billion, because they started as a data enterprise. They understood the structure of the way it is. They provided a level of access to that information that enticed people to want more, and then they created a model for people to license and access that information in a variety of different manners. And by the way, came up with products along the way that they could sell directly. So again, we don't have to invent everything in our industry. There's ideas out there that are useful that translate from maybe a new emerging industry like LinkedIn, like a community-based industry, to our industry. So let's take those and move a little closer to home. When you think about your data and information itself, data is nothing unless someone does something with it. So the natural question would be, what are the kinds of things that people might do with the data that you've collected if you make it available to them? Again, I don't want to dismiss leads. Leads are great. A lot of companies want leads. If I go on LinkedIn and I'm a recruiter, in effect, I'm out there looking for leads to fill a job. We're not poo-pooing that model as something that is not a valid way of doing it. it still needs to continue to be at the centerpiece, but maybe instead of the data being Brett clicked on an article, you can make your data available in a more robust manner, in a more accessible manner to say, my basic lead includes Brett's name and his email address, but the enhanced lead that I offer through my data is a comprehensive profile of an individual. Okay, so what would they do with that information? Well, all your data could lead somebody to do market research. You know, Randall Riley is a good example where people that want to understand trends in the trucking industry can go to them and look at their various different sources of data and do market research. And that might determine, as an advertiser, do I want to do business expansion into a market? Do I want to place potentially another salesperson in a geographic market? If I want to have an event as an advertiser, can I look through your data and determine best places for me to have a physical event? You know, if I'm doing sales call planning, if I'm an advertiser and I want to call on somebody, can I do research to verify information about a particular lead target other than the verifying that they still exist at a company? You know, a lot of people want data just to sound smart. We always think that everything has to be linear, but sometimes, I think we all do it, sometimes we just research. We learn, we look at information, we look at data, we look at trends, and even if they don't have a direct influence, it just makes us smarter. So imagine your customer uses your data just to be smarter in their job. And I always joke at this one, recruiting. You know, someone gave me this analogy one time, and I'll repeat it. Recruiting, basically, LinkedIn looks at movement among jobs or tenure at a job. Well, it wouldn't be hard for someone to figure out, to say, let's say you were an executive recruiter for in the pharmaceutical industry, and you were trying to recruit a chief sales officer. Well, it wouldn't be too hard for me to go into a database and say, since you guys know this, how many years consecutive has such an individual renewed their subscription to a print product? 3 consecutive years, they've had the same name, title, and company information. Recruiters love that because they could say, gosh, Brett's been there for 3 years. It's time for him to move on. He's a great candidate to recruit from. So once you start thinking about the various different use cases of your data, there's so many different ways that people can use it. We're just stuck as an industry in thinking, gosh, the only reason why they want to use my data is to sell a product. Or they want the lead, the name, the basic information, they want to go sell something. And they forget to realize that as an industry expert on content, you've established a thought process with them. It also makes you an industry expert on information. And again, Randall Riley, I'll use them again just because it's so fresh in my mind from seeing it, is a great example. You know, they've created this data services business, not just for actionable leads, but as you can see, for data insights. So they have EDA and RigDig and the driver recruiting database, TopBid. They have these created these carve-outs of data sources that they then can license to people that want access to these various different cuts within the industry. So, of course, they still use their data to sell direct Randall Riley products. It's brilliant. They still sell advertising, or they still sell events. They still want people to come subscribe to their magazines, to get on their websites, to pay for premium content. But again, they've created this whole separate mindset that says their insights from their own data as well as third-party data has created almost a research database that they can sell licenses to. They're private. I don't know. Someone told me one time they thought it was a $15 million business. You can ask those guys, but regardless, it's clearly something that has created a new carve-out for them as they've reinvented themselves beyond just being your kind of, quote, traditional content publisher. I love this other visual off their website. So this is all public data. I'm just grabbing it off their website. But they talk about how their data and how their strategy supports the sales funnel. And even in this visual, you can see they start with data. They make it clear that they're a data-centric business, and then the various different products flow from that. So again, throughout all their touches, they're making it clear that data and information sits at the heart of the value proposition they offer to the marketplace as well as to their direct customers. Another example in our industry specifically as a knowledge marketing client here, is a company called UBM Canon. And UBM Canon has taken this mindset, and I can share with you a little bit of insight, not too much proprietary information, but basically what they're doing is similar, and they're making available data that exists within their universe of people, within their community, available to special people that are either customers or industry folks that want to learn more information. So they have maybe over 1 million records. There's parts of their data, if you remember before, that they make free, and then there's parts of their data that is premium. And the nice thing, because they are a publisher, we all recognize they have a standard of audit quality on data that exceeds what a lot of other people do. They're, like you know, they're going through and verifying, they're requalifying, they're asking certain questions, they're capturing a lot of data, but not every data source in the industry maintains that same level of quality. So they've got this fantastic data asset that they've turned into data mine. What their mindset is, as we talked about before, is that in every big list, in every grouping of people within their community, they've got different pieces of data that qualify people in a certain way. We've talked about demographic data. They have demographic data on everybody within their database, of course. But they're also capturing behavioral information, as we talked about, this kind of specific sets of information around behaviors, lead score, clicks, website hits, kind of activity-related stuff. And then we have contextual information, topics, and areas of influence. So if you think about the idea that the broader the database that you have is great, but a lot of that data ends up being ubiquitous. The real premium stuff, the real compelling things sit towards the bottom of this chart, where people really want to hone in and pay a premium for that extra piece of information about either an individual or an industry that they can't get anywhere else. So again, we look at my profile as an example. There's components of this that is more expensive than others, and we want to expose that information strategically. The analogy that they use that we talk about is this is a fun little image, is the smaller the slice, the higher the price. The more targeted you can get to a very narrow but highly engaged and highly desired audience, community, or information set, the more narrow it is, the more appropriate it fits my needs, the more I'm willing to pay for it. If I recognize it's scarce, I'll pay more for it than I think if I can get it anywhere else. So why would you do this? Why do they do it, and why would you do it? Well, what the thought process is that there's a lot of companies that spend a lot of money with publishers. Think of your top 20 accounts or your national accounts or your major accounts, and we want to provide them with additional value add. So this value add for big clients, maybe we're not directly monetizing it, but we're saying, hey, look, in addition to the wonderful ads and content that we give you, we'll give you insight about the data and the people in the industry, the comings and goings, the movement, and verification information that we won't offer to anybody else. So that kind of stickiness that they're looking to do with their top advertisers is a second purpose. It's a way for me as a publisher to provide value to my advertiser other than selling them an ad. So the data is that second purpose. Obviously, like everyone, they want incremental new revenue. They want a differentiated lead program. So if the next guy says, oh, here's the 100 people that clicked on your ad and here's their email address, instead they have the ability to say, well, in addition to that, we've got a significant amount of profile data that we can provide, and you can go online and look it up under a secure site to see some additional information that they're willing to make available in an enhanced lead program. Obviously, as we talked about before, they're looking for additional revenue sources, not just at a company level, but in terms of how they monetize individuals. And lastly, companies look at this as valuation positioning. I mean, I think the question that a lot of executives in media are asking themselves is, how do we break out from being seen as a traditional legacy print provider? How do we reinvent ourselves or position ourselves in a new asset category of being in the data business, the information services business, the events business, the content business, the insights business? That's a better business to be in economically than being seen as a ad-centric traditional legacy publisher. So this initiative provides fodder for that. It helps extend the story of what makes them positioned as a business. Now, like you're probably asking, or a few of the questions that have come in are always like, well, I mean, is it a free-for-all? Is it a complete, you know, everyone's data that we've collected all these years is now available to the next guy? And of course, the answer to that is no. There are rules. You know, UBM and the clients that deploy this type of strategy certainly have a set of parameters. So obviously, they want to make sure that if you're going to give access to an individual's information, that you're thoughtful about it and you've got permission to do so. But all information, all records are available for informational insights. So for example, if we just say, what area of a business is most concentrated for new subscribers that have an interest in the latest trends in pharmaceutical drug development, we could say there's 10,000 people in that area, right? We don't necessarily, we're not giving up that individual name, but we're certainly using aggregate information to make recommendations. You know, they're setting monthly limits. You know, if someone wants to go in and buy access to Brett's information, I'm the CIO of a major hospital, we don't want every single person buying that same lead. So we want to make sure, and that if that's the case, that we're setting parameters to make sure we're not over-marketing to specific people. You know, we certainly want parameters on demographics. We want to give away information that is maybe ubiquitous. We want to set some controls on that special data that we want to hold as scarce information to us. You know, they have a good example where they want a shopping cart mindset. I mean, as an additional idea, you know, you think about how you sell research papers, or you have a shopping cart on your website for, oh, I want to buy a reprint, or I want to buy a back issue. Well, that same shopping cart e-commerce mindset can flow into how you sell access to certain pieces of data. So this might look like this. So Canon Data Mine, they provide maybe one piece of functionality, could be a contact verification technology. So I'm a big client of ours. I think I know the right information about a contact that I want to market to, or a lead you've provided. I want to go and verify if that record is still active. You know, I may want to go in and do some research. I may want to go in and find out whether an opportunity exists for me as an advertiser, again, without having to have a lead or an email associated with that. So they create a little simple UI that allows their big clients and advertisers on a licensed basis to go in and do some research. They can search for different people in different sectors within job functions to determine whether or not certain people exist. So again, think about lead research or people research without having you to go send an email blast. And they are smart. They provide some basic information, but fields are hidden. So this record for free, you can see, yep, we've got somebody. We do have an email address. You know, we do have a location. We do have a zip. We do have behavioral detail. But if you want it, you got to buy it. You know, so we say, great, we want to put them into a shopping cart. There's a cost associated with that. And they basically created this shopping cart model where they can go in and purchase individual access contact information, again, without having to have this full email blast in order to get new names. Similarly, they might just want to do verification. So this could be a simple research that says for free for 10 times, you know, you're within your monthly license fee, you can verify contact information at 10 people, at 10 different verifications per month. So you can go in and say, is Brett still there? I put in his information. Maybe I know partial information. I want to verify that Brett is the right person at a, you know, again, if I'm an advertising salesperson, I want to go in and verify whether he's the right person. You as the publisher can provide them with that verification functionality on a cost basis and then keep track of the history. So say, hey, Brett, you have a limit. You're allowed to download up to and verify up to 10 records per month. I saw you a license to that. I have limited information. And now I'm in the business of providing data access on a scheduled basis. So again, we're running up against the end of our time, but I wanted to just get you to think about it. So we've given you a couple of different examples, right? If you think about that, data is, you know, again, to use the slang of the publishing is all about the data. We all know that's happening right now, but what I wanted to do is try and show you some concrete examples of how people are doing it. I love the idea, and I wish it was originally mine, but I heard it at BIMS, the difference between thinking of a publisher's assets as a community, not just an audience. Because community implies exchange of information. It implies more of a fluid environment. It talks about sharing of information more than audience, which is really a one direction. It's you pitching to them in a one way, as opposed to community, which implies an interaction among a whole bunch of different parties. Again, think of data as a product in and of itself. It's not just a means to sell more products, but hopefully you've got a couple of quick ideas here on how to make it an end in and of itself, a way to monetize some additional business, some opportunity for you by looking at the data, not just how is it that we can use the data to sell another print magazine. And lastly, again, this $1.20 mindset, the idea that today when you have somebody in your community that they're worth a certain value to you just to sell them products or ads, but is there a way to take the information about them and supercharge the revenue that you get on a per-person basis? So this is such an important topic for us, and this idea about data that we've, our theme for 2015 and have created a video is really as data becomes center stage. 2015 is really the year across all the hundreds of people that we've talked to, really seems like the year that it will take center stage. And if you go out to our website, you can see kind of a recorded video that gives some perspective on how organizations are transforming themselves as well as individuals are preparing for a more data-centric business next year. So again, I want to thank everybody so much for coming. I'm going to answer one question that does come on, but if you have to go, I get it. I'm a little bit over my time, but thank you for attending. The question is, the additional question I can get to is, where does a lot of this data come from, and where does a lot of these little data companies get their data? Because clearly we know research is expensive, telemarketing is expensive, but what's happening is, and if you think about a place like Bizzo, or you think about DoubleClick, or some of these industries, a lot of that data is being aggregated, frankly, from things that you provide. What I mean by this, think about every time you place an ad from a third-party technology like DoubleClick on your websites, or you embed data from another provider, a technology provider, you embed functionality on there. Well, when that information gets clicked on, those data aggregators, the person that served that content, collects information about that individual that came across in that ad placement. So they aggregate some of this information from various different sources. Sometimes your first-party data becomes a company like Bizzo's third-party data. And all of these networks get together, sometimes little small sources, sometimes big sources, to aggregate data to help improve kind of the collective information that we all get to share in. So I say that's kind of a combination of both ubiquitous data, maybe some of that's available from a government source, or some of it's available from these data brokers, and other becomes private transactional data that a lot of tracking mechanisms on the web gather up. So I always, there's not one source. It's really the power of a lot of data, and a lot of these major data sources that they're collecting information from a lot of different places, which is why I go back to a publisher, especially in B2B, really needs to think of themselves as a data aggregator, because even if the products are all your own, plus some public data like government data, et cetera, you very quickly could become your own data business, just like somebody like a Randall Riley would be, because you have print products and event products and websites and all of these various different sources. By nature, in many cases, you have your own diversified set of sources and audiences. So again, I wanted to thank everybody. Appreciate it. Hope everybody's warm, because we in Minnesota are freezing. For those of you who want a copy of today's webinar, we will send you the follow-up. Certainly come out and follow us on social. Our website's full of information as well. And again, I wish everyone a great Thanksgiving and a really successful end to the year, and we'll see you guys again all next month. Take care. Thanks, everybody.